Hello and welcome to another edition of The Great Goddess. Praise be to Goddess. Praise be to Goddess. Today we will be discussing the subject of astrology and the validity of astrology and why it is that I personally believe that astrology has no validity. Well, astrology, what a huge topic. There's so many different branches of astrology and so many different types of astrology. Where to start? Well, you can start with the sun signs. And if sun sign astrology has no validity, then the whole house of cards falls in, because sun sign astrology is the epicenter of astrology. It's the core of the way astrology works. And if that doesn't work, then other kinds of forms of astrology aren't going to work either. And I have found in my experience, in my opinion, that astrology has no validity. It doesn't work. It's just random. It's random stuff, and if you've looked at it long enough, you'll realize that astrology is entirely random and it has no validity. It's just like taking random advice from a stranger that doesn't know you and doesn't know your situation, just taking random advice off the street. So astrology has no validity, and scientists have done studies on astrology. They've actually done research on astrology to see if astrology actually has any validity. And scientists have found that astrology has no validity. And they've done this in numerous experiments. They've shown how astrology has no validity. Now, why is it then that so many millions of people believe in astrology and follow it every day? Why is it that so many people believe in astrology if astrology has no validity? Well, the simple answer is something called perceptual bias. And perceptual bias is biases which we hold biases which we hold personally that are based on our perception. So those are perceptual biases. And let me tell you about one of these perceptual biases. Is called selective perception. And selective perception, I will give you a definition. Selective perception is the tendency to not notice and more quickly forget stimuli that causes emotional discomfort and contradicts our prior beliefs. Now, this is a perfect definition of perceptual bias, because selective perception is where when we believe hard enough in astrology, if we believe in astrology hard enough, then we're going to block out any stimuli that are telling us, any stimuli from our senses that tells us that astrology has no validity. And we're going to only accept those instances where it seemed to us as if astrology was valid. And that's going to happen randomly. Randomly, there's going to be hits and there's going to be misses. So if there's more hits than misses, astrology would have validity, but there's actually more misses than hits. So astrology doesn't have validity. But what we do is we use our selective perception to weed out all of the instances where astrology seemed to have no validity at all, and only pay attention to those hits where it seemed like astrology had some validity, And people can fool themselves for years and years thinking that astrology has some validity, and they're wasting their time on astrology, because astrology, in fact, has no validity. So now that we know how selective perception works and what it is it about astrology then that captivates people so? And the real question is astrology a sin? No, astrology is not a sin, but it is a colossal waste of time. And that's the truth. Astrology is not a science, it's a pseudoscience, and it's a colossal waste of time. It's much more interesting studying astronomy, because there's breakthroughs being made in astronomy every day, whereas astrology's been the same for over 2,000 years and isn't very interesting at all. So astrology is based upon our perceptual biases, our selective perception of hits versus misses, where we say that there's more hits than misses because we're only looking at the hits and ignoring the misses. All the times when astrology let us down, all the times when astrology would just seem like random advice and didn't seem to apply to our day at all. If the real way to look at astrology is if you look at a horoscope every day, if you read a daily horoscope, instead of reading the horoscope today, read the horoscope tomorrow and see if it fits with your day that just happened. And if it doesn't, you'll see very quickly how astrology has no validity at all. It's just random advice picked out of the air by the astrologer who's been trained to give random advice in such a way that it sounds like it has some validity to anybody, where whoever reads it can get something out of it. So it's almost like philosophy, because the astrologer is trained to make it sound like something that anybody could say that it applies to them in some way. So that's the way astrology is coached. It's coached in such a way that it sounds like it could apply to anyone. And the random person would say, yeah, that's me, that sounds like me, and it's really just random advice. So now that we know how astrology works, and we know that selective bias is at work, and we know that it's not a sin, but it is a colossal waste of time. Now, I know that that is actually a matter of debate. Some people would say that a waste of time is a colossal sin in itself, and I'm not going to debate with that. I'm not going to waste my time debating whether or not. I don't believe personally that it's a sin. You might feel differently about that, but it's not a sin, but it is a waste of time. That's the best that I can do. So that's it for astrology, and in the future we'll cover other subjects such as feng shui. Does feng shui have any validity? The short answer is no. And I've had many years of experience. I believed in astrology for a long time, and I had a perceptual bias in favor of astrology. And for years and years, I studied astrology. And based upon my studies, I found that it has no validity. I wasted a lot of time on that. So I know it's a colossal waste of time, and I know that it has no validity and that it wastes other people's time as well. So astrology, nay, it has no validity. We'll be getting to those other topics as well, as such as feng shui and how that has no validity in a future discussion. But I'd like to touch briefly on another subject, and that is prayer. And some people say, for example, is prayer the same as magic? And a lot of people wonder this. Now, I will discuss that in a future discussion, and magic works the same way as astrology. There's a perceptual bias. I'm sorry for all of you that have believed in magic so hard all of these years. We know that the Harry Potter kind of magic doesn't exist. You can't make things levitate and float around the room and go zigzagging all around and make people drop dead by pointing at them and go poof. We know that doesn't exist. But the other kind of magic doesn't exist either, like the love potions or the ones where you get your spouse to do something you want them to. None of it is valid. None of it. No magic is valid. So there's no such thing as magic. And I'm sorry for those of you who believe in it. I hate to burst your bubble, but there's no such thing as magic. Now, when you think that a magic spell has worked in your life and your personal experience, and you see that a spell that you cast has worked, what's really going on? It's just random. It's a random hit among many, many misses. And there's a perceptual bias that magic practitioners have, where they only look at the successful spells and ignore the unsuccessful ones. And so that perceptual bias is at work there. It works the same way as astrology. There's a perceptual bias, and there's a selective perception that in favor of magic and against magic not working. So that it sort of works the same way, and it's sort of the same thing because that magic there's no validity to magic whatsoever. But magic, unlike astrology, is forbidden. Magic is forbidden. And I can't tell you why magic is forbidden. All I know is that magic is forbidden. So talk about your colossal time wasters. Magic has to be the biggest time waster of all. I think it's because of the thought forms that you create during magic. This is why it's forbidden, because in your mind, you're creating all sorts of thoughts, and these thoughts affect the goddess. And so that's one of the reasons why magic is forbidden, whereas astrology doesn't affect goddess at all. It's just random nonsense and coached or presented as if it were a science, but it's not a science at all. It's a pseudoscience, and it really shouldn't be considered valid at all. So that's the summary. Magic and astrology, sort of the same thing, but not exactly. Both of them have no validity whatsoever. There's no such thing as magic, and astrology doesn't work. So put your perceptual bias behind you and look at things objectively, and you'll see I'm right. You'll see that there's no such thing, and that you've just been following random nonsense all of this time. Try real life. Real life is enough of an adventure. You don't need astrology to help you through your day. All you need is yourself and a little common sense and a little experience, and that's all you need. You don't need astrology, and you certainly do not need magic. This is Sarah Jane Alpha Wolf signing off again. Have a very pleasant day, and I'll see you next time.